Hello, hey, this is Brian with Extreme Audio here in Mechanicsville, Virginia. Today we're going to show you how to go from this to this while still looking like this with the new Motorrad Audio 6.5-inch upgrade for your 22 and newer K1600. What you're going to need for the job will be a T25 Torx, a right angle T25 Torx, and preferably a Dremel tool or something similar. There will be a little bit of trimming, a little bit of grinding, very minor, but we'll show you along the way. Let's get started. All right, so first what we're gonna wanna do is raise the windshield as far as it can go. You're gonna pop your lid there and take out the two upper screws. And of course, you're gonna have to get these guys here. They kind of go at an angle. You will want to do both when you're doing both speakers. Today we'll just be focusing on one side. From here, the screen will pop from the top, and you want to kind of just shimmy it out. And then we will worry about getting these plugs. So the big one has a couple detents on either end. You squeeze those together, just kind of walk it out. The smaller one is actually just a friction fit. You just give it a good tug, hold on to the plastic when you do it, and you're good to go. All right, from here we have a screw, pretty obvious here. The silver does come free once we're done, so you want to go ahead and put that aside. And then from here, we will want to remove the side winglets if you have them. So there's a little screw down in here that we're going to loosen, and what that will allow us to do is actually slide this forward and then outward to undo it. That'll be that. And then if I can get you over. All right, and with that done, you can see the innards of the winglet. This was the screw that we were loosening. And now there'll be 3 additional screws that'll take this entire fixture off. And this is what you're gonna end up with once that is removed. Now, the next thing we're going to want to do is fold your little wing out, and you see that screw down there. It's an extra long screw. Technically, you loosen it, this plastic will come out, and you can bring the screw out with the plastic. Just makes it a lot easier. And another trick is when you fold this wing out, there is an extra angle to get to this screw. Now, we don't need to get to this screw, but this gives us more room to get in here. And if you have big hands, it's a plus. That's the screw in the assembly like I was talking about earlier. All right, let me get you again. Now that we have that removed, we'll see one more screw that was being covered by that plastic shroud. That there's no trick for. Loosen it, try to get it. If it goes down in the fairing, it's not lost forever, but it's better to not. From here we have all of the screws that we need to worry about out. What we're going to want to do is grab an edge of this panel, and we're going to be going this direction with it. It's just popped on at this point. It comes off relatively easy. Just take it slow and steady. And there you have it. It's really just a couple of these little guys here holding it on there. All right, at this point, we got our speaker wire right here in our face. We got 3 screws that hold the actual speaker assembly in. Unplug this guy, take these out, and we'll move on to the next step. And there you have it. Once that's removed, we have, what we're gonna have to do is remove this actual mounting bracket for the old speaker. It's held in with 3 Torx screws from the side. This is what we need the right angle for. Just pop in there. I have noticed that these tend to be the only ones on these bikes that are Loctited in, so they'll be fairly tight. Just take it easy and you'll be fine. There we go. All right, once that's done, so we open up quite a bit more space in there. We're going to want to remove this guy here as well. I'll show you what that's all about shortly. And this is a rather long screw, so keep that aside specifically to go back in there. You may be looking at this, looking at your bike thinking, well, mine looks a little different. There's a wire harness that goes here, and there's a pink plug that goes there. The zip tie that holds the wiring on here is actually for this plug. This goes up in here. We need to trim that off and actually cut this tab, which is about a 1/2 inch longer, back to where it is now. The pink plug, which is actually here, is normally zip tied approximately there. Cut the zip tie, this will get tucked up in here, and we'll zip tie it to a different structure when we're done. From here, we're going to start actually installing the new stuff. This will be the new pod that's going to be going in here. We'll discuss that here shortly. But first, what we're going to want to do is zip tie this guy. I usually zip tie it to the speaker wire harness. There's 2 little flat spots in the plug to make for a nice zip tie. And then you'll see down in here, I put a zip tie around that to hold this and this so that there's no chatter. See, we've got this nice and secured here, keeping your speaker wires up for ease of installation. Now, this guy, what we're going to do is just bring it over here, and we'll put a zip tie through this hole around that, and that's going to be its new home. At this point, let's discuss a couple things. We've got this thing zip tied up. Got this little guy trimmed. That makes this side 100%. One thing, we got to remove this. I'll tell you why shortly. That makes this side completely ready for the installation. Now on the other side, looks pretty similar. The difference over here will be when you first get in, right below this little square is going to be a little piece of plastic holding a wiring harness. It's going to be this wiring harness right here. So you need to trim that. I'll insert a photograph to show, but it's probably about 1 inch long, so you have to get in here and trim it. Preferably with the Dremel that I mentioned earlier. Go ahead and grind this down maybe 1/8 of an inch. It's not 100% important, but you'll see why at some point. But we do need to have the tab under here cut flush. It's a very tight fit for these speakers, and it's really necessary. From this point, we're going to start prepping for the actual installation. So you'll notice we do have a hole on the side of the speaker. That's going to be going this way. Our mounting tab over here, pretty obvious. What I do recommend, we're going to be using the threaded stud from the bracket we removed earlier. I usually take one of the screws, run it in and out a few times just to clean up the threads. And then what we're going to be doing is installing a little stud into that hole that our new pod will dock on. And before we start getting this thing into the fairing, I'm going to recommend get yourself some masking tape, doesn't matter what flavor. Just going to protect the painted surface down here. before we get too deep. What we're going to do is install the supplied speed clip over here. I like to have it kind of tilted towards the front. Got the stud in, got the speed clip on. I don't have a pre-wired speaker to show here. You will have to refer to your wiring diagram to know which wire is which. But what you'll do is plug into your quick connects and try to line this hole with the stud that you just put in. And you can reach your finger in here and actually line them up. What I do is I pull back on that. She goes right on in there. The only reason we remove this screw is for that trick. This can be done without it. It's just 100% nicer. You may have to kind of fiddle with your speed clip over here. I keep mine clocked all the way as far as I can, which adds the clearance that you need. It might put itself into where it needs to go, but you may have to just fiddle with it a little bit to get it perfect. But that's essentially the install. From here, we're gonna put our fairings back on, hook the amplifier up if it's not already, and rock out. Thank you.
All right, so this is Mike with Motorrad Audio showing how to do the grill modification that you would do when you're installing our 6.5-inch pods. This isn't required, but if you notice, the opening here is not really very large because they're anticipating that small little speaker of theirs getting clearance. So it definitely helps if you open up some of these channels through here. You'll want to do that with a Dremel or a drill. The example I'll show you in a little bit was using a drill on it just because we assume most people would have like a step bit or something along those lines to do it with. If you're handy with a Dremel, you can open it up even more and a little more neatly. The main thing is that you're going to want to leave these ribs in here because this fabric, as you'll see later, is basically just held on by this. So you don't want that drooping down on you later by over modifying this and kind of giving it that space to move as heat softens up the adhesive or what have you over time. So we'll get to disassembling this. There's a couple Torx screws here, and there are a couple Torx screws here that you'll need to remove. You do want to pay attention to these because these two are slightly shorter than these two. So you want to make sure you put them back in the right place. I'm not sure if you put a longer screw in here, if it may perhaps dimple out the other side by accident or something along those lines. So we'll get to it. And by the way, this is a T20 bit. So once you have those taken out, you'll see some tabs floating around in here. There's a plastic tab here and another plastic tab there. If you push, or actually 3 of them, there's another one along these down on this end. So you want to push these tabs to release this grill away from it. You'll have to do a little bit of massaging to kind of get that apart as you go along through here. Once that pops loose, you can set this to the side, and now you'll have this, which is the grill assembly to the front end there. So what holds this together is basically the grill goes through a whole bunch of slots here. So you'll need to bend these tabs up as you go around to be able to release that front section. So you can use a flathead screwdriver or whatever kind of tool you've got. Some of you may just be able to do it with your fingers, depending on how tough your skin is, that kind of thing. And you'll have this, we'll bend these up here real quick. And this is a plastic piece that will basically pull out from underneath the edge. There's a little tab here that kind of holds it down, and that comes off. That's the one that goes with your short screws. Once you have all these bent up, you'll just kind of want to slowly work your way around the grill. Try to be gentle with it. Try to work with it as much as you can. You don't want to be too rough and accidentally bend part of the grill or something and change the good cosmetic of the bike. So just be patient as you go around. I'd done the other side grill and didn't remember this was here. So you do have your latching assembly here. So you will need to remove this screw as well to kind of get clearance in there to take that off. You won't have that on the other side. And there's one more tab behind there that's kind of keeping that all from coming apart. So once you have this apart, you'll notice that this grill is completely perforated. There's no blockage of any kind when it comes to the grill itself. So the main thing is, again, this carpet, I'm not sure if it's adhered on here or how it's adhered on here, so you don't want to cut too much of that away so this can droop on you later. But the good part is, since it's completely blocking the entire grill, any modification that you're going to make to this is going to be completely invisible to the eye once it's reassembled. So you don't have to worry about changing the look of the bike. It'll look completely factory. So now that you've got that apart, you kind of see what we're working with here. What we have here is the one that we had already done kind of testing this out. So you'll see where in between each of these squares, we drilled with a step drill down to kind of open that up, but then didn't really trim out the excess. Again, if you have a Dremel and you're handy with it or something along those lines, you could open these squares up even more. Just leave the structure there. We were doing a bunch of testing in actually replacing the front badge assembly that's on there with something that's maybe perforated and lasered out. That may be an upgrade that we offer down the road for people that don't feel the tweeter is loud enough. So we had cut this portion out in doing that testing. When you're doing this one, assuming you're not going to be doing that modification, then just leave this intact. There's no real reason to cut this out. This does block the tweeter that's going in there, but thankfully the tweeters that come in the Infinity Kappas, the Hertz, and the Rockford versions, they are quite aggressive tweeters because they're designed for Harley and loud noise and everything else. So typically, even with this blockage, you still get plenty of treble out of it. But if you really want it screeching your head off, you could cut this out and we could supply you with a lasered badge that has perforation in it, but it kind of changes the look of the bike a little bit. So that's going to be your preference there. But basically just go through and drill as many holes as you're comfortable drilling. This side where there's no latch assembly, can't do as, we could do more if we wanted to. Not sure if that would really accomplish anything, but you know, you wouldn't be able to do it on this side because of the latch for the little flap up top. So drill a couple holes there, a couple holes here that you can kind of squeeze in, a couple there, and that just opens up everything to let that sound come through better. And then once you reassemble it, it'll look just like it came that way from the factory, but you'll be getting a lot more output out of your speakers.